Hello, I'm Jon Hopwood, and welcome back to Ward 13. This is part 2 with my friend Mike Hammond, who is lived in Ukraine for the past 4 years, and altogether has lived in the former Soviet Union for about 19 years. Part 1, last week we talked about Russia and breakup of the Soviet Empire, its psychological effects, and about Putin, who I call him Tsar Putin. This show, we're going to focus on Ukraine itself. John, can you show us those maps of Ukraine, of old Ukraine? Let's see what this is. This was the Slavs. Can you see this, Mike? Can you see it on the back? Oh, you can't. These are just the territory. We have the Slavs when they're being pushed by the Turkish people and the different people. They are south of the Balts. They're going like from what would be Poland now to like what would be southwestern European Russia. Next map, John. Here is the Kievan Rus, which was about the 13th century. So at one point, Kiev was the center of Slavic culture. But that was 700 years ago.
That explains a lot about why Russians view Ukraine and Kiev so...
Is there a rivalry? Kiev?
Well, they Putin in a recent speech said that Kiev is the mother of all Russian cities or Slavic cities.
Oh, so he believes
because of Kiev and Rus. That was that Russian culture, if you want to call it Russian culture, started with Kievan Rus, right? And it kind of migrated to Russia.
So this is similar to Serbia in Kosovo.
Yes.
There's a real attachment.
So they feel they feel a spiritual attachment. And, the Russian Orthodox Church here, I think, much of the church property here is actually the property of the Russian Orthodox Church. There's a conflict kind of going on between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and they both kind of lobby the...
Okay, Mike, one of the major things that happened, John, can you give us the Polish maps? The Poland maps? You remember, Poland was part of the Russian Empire until 1918. Well, to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. You can see my pronunciation is still so great, Mike. And it was a rather large country between 1918 and 1939. And we have to remember, it fought a war against the First Red Army in 1920. And it was nearly defeated by the Red Army, but then the Poles beat the Russians, the Soviets. Now we have a map of the Curzon line, which had been set. How do we create Poland? And Curzon, I believe wasn't he the British British foreign minister? Well, it will go through Brest. Brest will be on the right. That will be part of Russia, and then Warsaw over to the west. Brest to the east will be part of Russia. Warsaw in the west, that will be Poland.
So arbitrary lines.
Right, there were arbitrary lines. But in 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland, the Soviets came in eventually from the east, and they took Poland. And after the war in 1945, they took Poland to the Curzon line. And what was given to Germany was East Prussia, Silesia. We have the map now, this is a 1939 map. Russia just took half of Poland. And that part they retained after the war, and that's Belarus and a good chunk of Ukraine, isn't it? So
I think it's not Belarus in its entirety,
right?
Because actually I've been to Belarus many times and I have friends there, and
Minsk is the capital of Belarus.
What they say, and what I can't really verify that myself, but they say that like when you go to the part of Belarus that was part of Poland before pre-1939, that the farms are the farms and
right.
Agriculture is still more effective, and efficient and advanced than the part of Belarus that's been under Soviet rule or Russian rule.
The fact is, the Soviets, though, reclaimed from what was Poland, the 1939 regime, a good part of what was Ukraine. And I want to ask you about somebody that I only found out about today, Stefan Andreevich Bandera. What can you tell us about this man, Bandera?
Well, the reason he's...
Oh, John, can we have the pictures of Bandera? Here's a picture of Bandera about the time probably before he declared, when the Nazis invaded Ukraine, he declared an independent Ukrainian republic, right?
Yes.
And did he collaborate with the Nazis?
Yeah, okay, they say that he did. And of course, he's a figure that's been vilified in Russian and Soviet propaganda since the World War. He is viewed as a traitor, a collaborator, a fascist.
Mike, we have a picture
as are his followers.
We have a picture of this man who's considered by Russians and by Eastern Ukrainians as a fascist collaborator and a mass murderer because his organization, took part in massacres allegedly. We had the picture of him in Freedom Square, a poster, and now he's on stamps in Ukraine. This controversial figure, and wasn't he declared a hero of Ukraine? How did that go over well?
I think
Ukraine?
in the western part of Ukraine, he is viewed as a hero.
A folk hero,
something of a perhaps not the father of the nation, but an early proponent of Ukrainian statehood.
Because he did fight against the Poles. He fought against the Poles.
On Maidan, there's still a big poster of him, but he is of course hated and despised by the Eastern and the Russian speakers within in Ukraine and of course in Russia, because they view him as someone who fought against their ancestors, who fought, bled, and died in World War II or the Great Patriotic War. So today, his followers are referred to as Banderites, which is used in a derisive manner by the Russian speakers in Ukraine and the Russians. So in Russian propaganda today, the current Ukrainian government is referred to as a fascist junta. So what they're really saying in the message they're trying to get out to the Russian-speaking population within Ukraine, and of course the Russian population, is that the followers and radicals, followers of Bandera, and the radicals from the western part of Ukraine essentially took over the Ukrainian government. Now they're the ones leading this war to take back eastern Ukraine, and so therefore it's an illegitimate government, and the fascists are coming. In other words, because there are some followers of Bandera, they're called fascists by the
Russians. The Great Patriotic War is seen as a war against fascists. In Russia and former Soviet Union, that war is as significant for like a rebel like you from Sunflower County, Mississippi, as the war between the states, isn't it? And with a little more raw memories.
We have this way of kind of mythologizing or glorifying a war after it's over, and perhaps for propaganda purposes. Like in the South, we always said that it was the lost cause. Our guys died valiantly.
The South shall rise again.
Right. When I was growing up, I would see bumper stickers on cars, and it was common. It's like, hell no, we ain't forgetting.
Right.
In other words, it was still part of the local mythology.
How many times have you and other rebels in the army called me a damn Yankee? Let me just say something. Getting back to Bandera, his Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Now, Bandera wanted to collaborate with the Nazis, but the Nazis, being Nazis, threw him in jail. But the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists in 1942 launched a campaign of ethnic cleansing of Volhynia, and in early 1944 they began to do ethnic cleansing in eastern Galicia. While the Jews, they weren't as anti-Semitic as other fascist organizations, but the OUN said, the Jews in the USSR are the big group that supports Bolshevism, that old canard. So there was definitely anti-Semitism, and it would be my guess they might have helped in some of the ethnic cleansing there. The word that I'm writing down here, here's what Bandera and his government said in 1941 after the invasion. The Ukrainian People's Revolutionary Army, which has been formed on the Ukrainian lands, will continue to fight with the Allied German Army against Muscovite occupation for a sovereign and united state and a new order in the whole world. Now, I just remember, I know what the Holocaust means to, Jews, and the resonance of that. Is the fear of people against the Western Ukrainians, let's say the fear of Eastern Ukrainians, ethnic Russians, and different ethnic groups, because there are different ethnic groups that are still in Ukraine, are they not? Is there fear against a retaliation or an ethnic cleansing in an area of the world that's not, exactly known for, all roses and doves and stuff? There's been a lot of bad stuff going on in the former Soviet Union. Is there fear? I'm not going to say justified, but it's an engine behind this, isn't it? The fear is not unjustified.
Okay, well, I think the fear has been. Let me give you an example. There's still a Jewish community in Russia. In Ukraine.
It survived.
Of course, prior to World War II, there were many, many more Jews here.
Right.
As part of Russian propaganda, I can't say. I mean, it may be that the Jewish population, Jewish community here, Jewish leaders were fearful or apprehensive of some of these nationalist parties that participated in the Maidan revolution. The fear of that was certainly played up in on Russian TV and Russian press, saying that these fascists are coming in and they're anti-Semite and they're going to come in and punish or take revenge on some of the Jewish oligarchs. But in fact, the Jewish leaders and Jewish oligarchs, as the economic or as the magnates, the rich guys are called here, they're now cooperating very closely with this government. So I haven't seen any evidence of Jews, for example, being apprehensive about this government.
They're just atavistic fears that go deep, that will be subsumed by this. And
it's quite possible, John, that some of these nationalistic parties, like one of them is called Svoboda, freedom.
Yeah.
Nationalistic Ukrainian parties. It could be that they're on their best behavior right now to show the West that no, we're tolerant and open to various people and ethnicities and whatever. I mean, it could be that the time of for example, Jewish and the tension between Jews and Ukrainian nationalists will only come later. But I'll have to say I haven't seen any evidence of it so far, because now what most people just want to have is peace in their country again and kind of minimal interference from Russia. But of course, that's never going to happen because Russia views Ukraine as vital to their national interests.
Well, when we were studying the Soviet Union, there was a concept of the glacis. like the glacis is the area outside of fort, just leading up to the fort. There, it's not the fort itself, but it's the area, and it's militarized in order to delay an attack on the fort. It's part of the defensive fortifications, but not the fort itself, the glacis. And it was always considered, when we were studying, that the Soviet Union considered the satellite countries, the old Warsaw Pact countries, as part of their defensive glacis.
Well,
that there will never be an invasion again. And this has steadily been rolled back. And remember, when we put, are there missiles now, NATO missiles in Poland?
I don't think so.
But there was a proposal to put anti-ballistic missiles in Poland, which that really seemed to set Putin off. But I could see him accepting Poland. Poland is part of the West now, but going into Ukraine, that would be going over like the Rio Grande. They talk about crossing the Rubicon.
That's a bridge too far.
Right, it's a bridge too far. And the EU was flirting with Ukraine, as they like to do, knowing that the United States, with our military and our money, will have to pick up the pieces. The EU was flirting with Ukraine before this crisis, weren't they?
Yeah, well, that was actually the reason for the uprising in the center of Kiev here on the Maidan. Really? Was that the previous president, as had presidents before him, promised that they were going to take have a European orientation, and that they were going to sign an association agreement, whatever that was going to mean, with the European community. And when at the last hour, the previous president, Yanukovych, refused to do that and instead signed an agreement with the Russian, with Russia, for aid, which was probably going to lead to a customs union with Russia. That's when people quite simply revolted, because that's when it told them, after all, we're going to stay in, or this president wants us to stay in the Russian economic zone and under Russian influence.
Right, and he's not about to let Ukraine go out of his sphere of influence. That would just be it. It would be, like we said, a bridge too far.
Yeah, well, I guess the whole European Union association, the whole idea seemed kind of innocuous or harmless to me and to many others.
As a Westerner,
but I guess Russia viewed it as a first step towards NATO.
Right. Yes.
Because that's the first step towards Western integration, and which will be followed by NATO membership. And that's what they just can't accept.
Going back to my friend Victoria's from Kaliningrad, the oblast that's between Poland and, what is it, Latvia. I always get Estonia. Lithuania, which was the former Königsberg, a great place in the great city of East Prussia. She says, oh my God, how we would love to be able to get to the European Union. And, she hates Putin, but this Russian nationalism is like, being an American, I'm so much American it hurts, you know what I mean? But so there are people that would just love to get out from under the thumb of Putin, right?
Yeah, no.
I think whether that can be achieved.
But Russians, you're right, though. Russians are very... they can criticize their country, but you can't, right?
Right, that's true.
And they're very, maybe perhaps patriotic is not the word, but they feel their Russianness very, very strongly, And I think, personally, I think it has to do with the fact that going back to the fact that they, in their soul, they feel threatened. Because they've grown up having to feel threatened. They've had these forces from the outside, whether it was the Mongols or the Western, always attacking them, and so they feel very defensive about their
grandparents, their great grandparents, their grandparents, their parents. They've all gone through wars, and Soviet Union lost 25 million people dead. Whole generation of men was virtually wiped out. But the fear. is real. But I want to get to, we got about 6 or 7 minutes. What's it like to be an American in Ukraine at this point in your life and career? How has it affected your life, and how has it affected you as a businessman?
Oh, well, I'll be perfectly honest. With my current work, 90% of our business comes from the Russian market.
It does.
So, there's...
So you're just stationed in Kiev because it's a better quality of life?
Yeah, by choice. I mean, it would be more convenient were I to be located in Moscow. But I just couldn't do that any longer. It's too much of a... it's just a huge city, huge traffic, not very clean air, and probably Kiev has more of a little small. It's a big city, but it's more of a small town feel, and people are
it's clean and well kept.
It's clean, and in my own opinion, I wouldn't want to offend anyone, but there's much less aggression here than in Russia, than Moscow. And so in Kiev, as an American or as a Westerner, you could feel right at home.
Really?
And they actually like Westerners here. In Moscow, sometimes not.
Well, we were their enemy for what? 2 generations. We were targeted against the Soviet Union. I'll tell you a funny story about Big Hop and Russians after the broadcast. Well, they were, I'll just say World War II. People like Hop thought they were going to go to war with the Russians next. And it was not Soviets, but the Russians, right? So we were enemies for how many? 45 years.
But in modern day, in Russian under the Putin era, we Westerners or Americans in particular, we're viewed as kind of subversive or potentially subversive, and that we don't like them or we don't respect them. And and this on a personal level. For example, personally, I feel much safer in Kiev than in Moscow. I recall
crime?
Some colleagues from the UK came to Moscow. This was 6, 7 years ago, perhaps even longer. Pardon me. But to Moscow for an event, a business event that we were having, a seminar, and we were out that evening having dinner and went to it's kind of like a beer restaurant or a pub. And of course, there are English guys and maybe a Dutch or two, and maybe 5 of us. And we're drinking beer and talking loudly in English. And there was a table across the hall of Russian guys, kind of burly, threatening looking, guys that probably
KGB
visit the gym. Looked pretty threatening. But they'd also had plenty to drink, and they were just glowering, just staring at us threateningly. Obviously they didn't understand a word of English, but they knew it wasn't Russian. They probably recognized it as being English, and they were just staring at us, just threateningly. They just didn't like us being there. You would never find that in Kiev, for example, but in Moscow, you could wind up on the wrong side of the street, theoretically, if you're as a foreigner.
We're winding down now, but is there any feeling amongst the American community in Kiev, in Ukraine, that the State Department might eventually ask you to leave? Is the situation that bad, or what is the situation? How do you feel? Do you feel you're going to be in Kiev at the end of the year?
First of all, let's say this, and I think that it's fortunate that you're bringing up this.
We only have 2 minutes left, so we got to wrap it up.
Because we could still have a war here. We could.
Right.
As I read my Twitter feed with all these journalists that are in Russia and Ukraine, Russia has a lot of troops on the border with Ukraine ready for an order. And so if it looks as though Ukraine is getting closer to a military victory, if the Ukrainian army seems to be getting closer to military victory in the east, then Russia could just say, Putin could say, hey, listen, I'm not going to let them kick, I'm not going to let them kick my proxies out that easily.
Send in an airborne division.
Yeah, and so he could send. We could still. By the time your viewers see this, we could have had a Russian invasion, and it could be under the guise of a humanitarian mission.
Right.
But the purpose of it would be to establish, facts on the ground, as they say, in eastern Ukraine, saying, "Hey, this is our sphere of influence." And what Russia would really like to do, what Putin would like to do, is to keep that kind of open wound in the Ukrainian body politic, so that they would have some influence over decisions in Kiev.
Okay.
So we can still have a war. I mean, we have. I guess, do we call this a low-level conflict going on now? I mean,
yes, that would be the technical term.
But can you have a low-level conflict when you have artillery, John?
Yeah. Yes, you can. But
okay.
We're dealing.
Well, then let's call it a low-level conflict.
What would you say? We got to wrap it up. Just a few. What would you say to Americans like my Senator Kelly Ayotte that are very bellicose about Ukraine? Would the United States being bellicose with with Russia over Ukraine, selling weapons and that? What would that do? Would it do any good?
I know that your senator has been to Kiev.
Oh yes, twice.
At least once. Yes. That's a difficult call. I mean, once we start just providing lethal weapons to Kiev, we're coming closer to potential conflict ourselves. I mean, that's a difficult call.
People seem to have forgotten the Cold War.
Yeah, there are things that we could do, by providing the Ukrainians with, some defensive equipment, or whether it's with body armor or night vision goggles,
economic aid,
or intelligence, as they say. What's going on the ground, satellite intelligence that we could be doing to help them. Whether we should be providing them with lethal weapons or not, that's a tough call, and I hate to be the president having to decide that. But right now, it doesn't seem that we're doing any of that. We could be doing more, probably. And frankly, from my point of view, I wonder, has the era of great diplomacy passed? I mean, can we not sit down and find a solution? Maybe there is no solution, But I read an article lately saying that where the guy was saying, I hope that either the West or Russia has a plan B.
Yeah,
because neither of them is going to get plan B.
I agree with you as a former Sovietologist. Well, Mike, thank you very much. Maybe I'll get over there. Is there going to be a Gaspaja Hammond coming back from Kiev with you?
Not in the works just now, but we'll have to get to work on that quickly. Come on over, John. Be happy to see you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, my viewers. Until next time, this is Jon Hopwood. Thank you for visiting me on Ward 13.